So obviously last night we had the big statement from Theresa May, and it looked like that she was calling for a government of national unity. However, I think me and many people that were looking at it were expecting her to generally just come out and resign. That's what a lot of us, I think, were expecting, just to say, right, I've had enough, I'm going. And that's what a lot of us were actually expecting. However, once again, we turn to Ian Dunt, because this is a guy who's been spot on his reporting for Brexit from day one. So this comes from politics.co.uk, and it's the number 10 statement. Look out for Theresa May's no-deal trap. It all sounded so reasonable and open, and that was probably the first indication that something could be wrong. Theresa May's statement in Downing Street today is just like all her Brexit commentary. It was extremely murky and unclear. It sounded like one thing, but it could entail something else entirely. So, leaving with a deal is the best solution, she said. So we will need a further extension of Article 50, one that is short as possible, which ends when we pass a deal. That sounds positive. She said she would go to the EU next week and request extra time. It sounded a lot like she was ruling out a no deal. And there was more. The Prime Minister seemed to have given up on getting the ERG and DUP on side. So instead, she would reach out to Jeremy Corbyn to try and find a deal that they could both agree on. And remember, the strategy, the Conservative current strategy for Jeremy Corbyn is trying to place him as someone who is not fit to take the mantle of leadership. But they have basically cast Jeremy Corbyn by going to him and casting him in that light. So very evidently they don't believe that, and that all that thing of he's not suitable for leadership is complete wash from the Tories. But we've known that for a while. So, if they could find agreement on one proposal, they would bring it forward together. If not, they would lay out a series of proposals and have the Commons vote on them, as they had recently during the indicative votes process. The government stands ready, she promised, to abide by the decision of the House. It all sounded so reasonable. A realistic timetable, cross-party cooperation, it was like a whole new Prime Minister. But then came the dangerous part. She got to a bit in her statement where, if you were looking hard enough, you could see the tactical sleight of hand. The government would bring forward the withdrawal agreement bill, she said, referring to the domestic legislation enacting the deal with Brussels. We would want to agree a timetable for this bill to ensure it is passed before the 22nd of May so the UK need not take part in European parliamentary elections. And that's when the alarm bells started to ring. This was the bit that will define if this is a real attempt to turn a page on how she approaches Brexit or another cynical trap based on deception. The European elections are a crucial moment in the Brexit process. The EU has been clear that if UK does not take part in those elections, it cannot remain inside because it would mean that the European Parliament would be potentially be illegally constituted. The danger was always that May would use this fact to pivot Parliament into a place where it had to choose between her deal or no deal. The elections are on May the 23rd, but the last date Britain can pass the domestic legislation to take part is on the 12th is April the 12th. This creates kind of a danger zone, a time window in which May could put a deal to Parliament in the knowledge that no further extensions of Article 50 were possible. This is not paranoia. This is simply a description of her standard approach. Throughout the Brexit process, she has tried to force MPs to choose between her deal and no deal, because the only situation which a specific Brexit deal would look attractive is if it was compared with the disaster of a cliff edge. At the start, it was by delaying parliamentarians a meaningful vote. Now it may be using trickery around the extension offer. This is why the EU has set two deadlines. One was for May the 22nd, just before the elections were held, in the event the Prime Minister got her deal through and needed more time to pass legislation bringing it into effect. The other was April the 12th, when the UK would need to decide to take part in the elections. The expectation was that if no deal had been agreed by then, the British team would go to Brussels, request a longer extension, probably to the end of the year, and propose some sort of process for figuring out how a deal might eventually be agreed. May is now playing around with those dates in an interesting way. You have to pay very close attention to her speeches. She hides her strategy in precise wording of the texts. Let's look at that sentence again. We would want to agree a timetable for this bill to ensure it passes before the 22nd of May, so the UK need not take part in European parliamentary elections. It sounds simple, but it isn't. It has two potential meanings, and the difference between them could mean everything to the Brexit endgame. The best case scenario, it means she will ask for a longer extension, possibly to the end of the year, pass the domestic legislation to take part in the European elections by April 12th, and then try to get the deal through before May 22nd, so that we can leave before the election actually takes place. That would be fine. It would be simple to be a political ambition rather than a legal trap. There is some evidence she might intend this. De facto Deputy Prime Minister David Langdon yesterday wrote to the Electoral Commission instructing them to prepare for an election as a contingency measure. But there is the worst case scenario too. She could be planning to only request an extension of Article 50 to May the 22nd. This would take the EU's deal timetable offer and apply it to her no-deal circumstances. All the talk of working with Jeremy Corbyn and an indicative votes backup mechanism in this interpretation will not really be meaningful. It would simply be there to convince the EU to extend their offer without the UK having to pass legal legislation to take part in the elections. This strategy would be intended to get the UK into the danger zone, that window of time between the 12th of April and May the 22nd. When no further extensions of Article 50 would be possible, then she could do what she says she has always wanted to do and force MPs to pick between her deal and no deal. There is evidence for this too. Just look at her proposal for the first extension of Article 50, in which she outlined 2 time periods, but then only asked the EU for the shorter one. You would, let's be frank, be mad to trust her. The degeneracy and accountability of May's strategies hinges on the meaning of that sentence. If she requests a long extension but intends to get the deal done quickly, it is perfectly honourable, truthful and sensible. If she only requests an extension until May the 22nd, it's a trap. Neither MPs nor Brussels should allow her to spring it. And that's, once again, the situation we are now in. May is going to try and spring a trap to basically go, okay, my deal or no deal. But here's the thing, MPs could potentially rebel and just go, okay, we're just going to pull Article 50 altogether. I don't know whether that will actually happen, but no one wants a no deal. We know that. All the indicative votes, the last one we've just been through and the one before that, have shown that MPs do not want a no deal, and they will do anything they can to avoid it. So they will do either 2 things, because these are the generally 2 options. Either they vote for May's deal, or they rebel and they go, okay, we're just going to revoke Article 50. And once again, everything is in play, because once again, as we've said, Brexit means anything, and we generally don't know what the hell is going to happen.